Hi, welcome to my podcast. I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and you've joined me on cleaning up your mental mess. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about how you can balance your brainwaves. Yes, balance your brainwaves and literally increase your joy. How to do that. And why is that so important? Well, we're immersed in so much toxicity and we have so much stress in life that I just felt that I needed to give you some really good news to show you that within seconds, you can balance your brainwaves and you can change the whole functioning of your neurophysiology, and that can help you through the day. So I'm going to explain that in this podcast, and I chose to do this in response to a post that we actually put up. And that post says, vent your joys, not just your problems. And basically I said, this is such a simple thing, but something we don't do enough. Often we feel it's because we're boasting, but we need to celebrate our wins. This boosts resilience, helps our brains reset and become stronger, and just makes us feel better and happier. So essentially, I encourage you to vent all the frustrations. If you've got to get it out. If it doesn't get out, it goes in. But I also want you to practice venting your joys, because it is a super quick way of balancing your brainwaves. So I'm going to explain about that today and how brainwaves work and how this whole venting your joys is going to help you balance your brainwaves. But before we begin, I want to remind you of my annual conference, my mental health retreat that is taking place this December 2nd through the 4th in Dallas, Texas. I am really thrilled that we're going to be in person. We will be taking precautions. We'll be following CDC guidelines, so people will be protected. But this is your chance to come and really get hands-on practical tips on how to manage the anxiety, the depression, the stresses, the toxicity that we've been experiencing over this period of the pandemic, and how it's affected different age groups in different ways, but overall how it's changed our lives. And we need some practical hands-on techniques and tips on how to clean up the mental mess that the pandemic has caused. So I'll be there in person with you, being able to sign your books, connect with you, and really help you and me help ourselves through the situation. And one more thing before we begin, this podcast is for educational purposes and not medical advice. So if you need medical advice, please contact the appropriate medical professional. Back to today's podcast. Okay, so brainwaves. Oh, I love talking about brainwaves. And I know that sounds crazy, but brainwaves are so beautiful because brainwaves are like visual evidence of the fact that our mind is functioning and that our mind is working, that we're alive. And we have these, and basically a brainwave is the energetic response or the energy response of the brain to our thinking, feeling, and choosing. So thinking, feeling, and choosing is mind. And we are always thinking, feeling, and choosing. So our mind is always in action. So that means that our brain is constantly responding 24/7 because our mind is working 24/7. The different parts of the mind are working in different ways 24/7. And the brain is responding energetically 24/7. So there's energy going through this brain. So the mind is separate from the brain, as you've heard me say many times. The mind is how you think, feel, and choose. And it's this energetic force. The brain is the physical substance, and the brain responds to the mind. But here's another way of looking at it. The brain and body are how we experience our mind. So right now, as you're listening to me, your ability to actually respond to me and understand me and experience these feelings and emotions and apply this knowledge, that is your mind moving through your brain and your body. So you are experiencing your mind in your brain and your body. So we use our brain and our body to experience our mind, and our mind is the driving force behind getting the brain and the body to respond. So there's many ways we can look at this, but brain waves are what I'm going to talk about today, because just having a little bit of understanding of brain waves is just another way of just seeing how phenomenally powerful we are, and also give us hope with this whole concept of mind management. So because I'm always trying to help you manage your mind and help me manage my mind with all the things that we go through in life. So here's just a little bit of science first off, and I am actually going to be working from a paper that I'm busy writing on the brainwaves. So I'm just going to highlight certain things and read little things to you and teach you about your brain and brainwaves. Okay, so I use QEEG brain technology in my neuroscientific research. Now, brain technology can't read your thoughts. Brain technology can't say you have depression, because you can't have depression. You experience depression. depression is a warning signal, okay? You've heard me say that a million times. So depression is not an it. So you can't read depression in the brain, but you can see the effect of when you're feeling the warning signal of depression because of what's going on in your life. You can pick that up as changes in signals, brainwave signals in the brain. Okay, so basically brain technology shouldn't be used to say you have depression as though it's an it, but rather that your experience of depression in response to what is going on in your life is reflecting as low energy in the brain. Now I can flip that one around and say that your experience of joy, of a wonderful experience that's going on in your life, is also going to reflect in high energy or balanced energy in the brain. So what we see is that when we're in any kind of extreme state, so extremely depressed, extremely anxious, extremely panicky and so on, or extremely frustrated, extremely angry, in extreme fear, when we have that, then that kind of state, or extreme highs where we like abnormally high, like almost sort of manic highs, any of those extreme states, which I always explain as being in the minus 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on that sort of scale when it comes to the negative side, and then on the positive side, sort of 5 to 10 on the sort of manic side. So 0 to minus 4 plus 4 is kind of the average range where we move during the course of any one day. Then when we slip down to the extreme states of depression, etc., it's going minus 5 to minus 10 with increasing levels of degrees of sort of mind expression, mind breakdown. And on the other side, when we get extreme states of manic sort of states, that's sort of 8, 9, 10 on the plus side. So that's just to kind of give you a reference range. So what we want is to kind of get ourselves in that minus 4 plus 4 range. And I just use this as an analogy to help you kind of picture this. So what we see is that when a person is kind of managing their mind, managing the messes and repairing and growing and getting frustrated, but owning the frustration and moving through the frustration, or being triggered and making a statement and saying, oopsie, okay, that was just an outburst. It's not really how I feel, and repairing that, or getting mad at someone, or getting into an argument with someone and stopping yourself and saying, okay, hang on, let me cool down. I'm reacting. Let me switch over to responding, and fixing that and repairing it. When you wake up feeling really, really maybe frustrated or sad or complaining, and you catch yourself in that state and you change it. All of these little examples I'm giving are where you are literally bringing the brain back into balance. And you do that with your mind. So your mind is being experienced in the balancing of your brain waves. And what we see is when your brain waves are balanced, and I will explain this in depth, it makes you feel a lot more peace. And that makes sense because your mind controls your brain and your body, and it's mind to brain to body. So once the mind is generating an energy flow that is one that's managed, a good balanced energy flow like I've been describing, that creates a very nice balanced energy flow in the brain on a quantum and electromagnetic level that then stimulates all the different systems of your body, like your endocrine system and your cardiovascular system and your lungs and your respiratory system and your neurological system. All of those start becoming more balanced. And when things are more balanced, we're going to then have more resilience. It doesn't mean we're not going to be sad or frustrated or angry, but it becomes more balanced. It goes from that extreme state into a balanced state. Then our resilience increases and we can actually be able to manage things more effectively. We can kind of see the wood for the trees. We don't have that complete like blanking out and get completely impulsive and overwhelmed and that kind of stuff. So my goal with mind management is to try and help people to be realistic and realize that, it's okay to be sad and all that stuff. But you can balance your brainwaves. You don't have to feel helpless. And if you're in an extreme state, you can sometimes on your own, and sometimes you need support, bring yourself back into a more balanced state. And just getting knowledge. What my experience as a researcher and a scientist is that when you provide people with knowledge, they get understanding. And when people get understanding, they get wisdom. And when you have wisdom, you look at things differently from a different perspective. That's why I give you this kind of knowledge, to help you get understanding, get knowledge, get understanding, get wisdom, because wisdom says, I need more knowledge, more understanding. And it trains you in this beautiful, deep thinking mode, so the whole way you're doing that is through the neurocycle that I keep talking about, which is the systematic way that you drive this way of thinking. So, and also the research shows that when you get knowledge, then your behaviors change. And when you get knowledge and you shift attitude, then your behaviors change. So in the neurocycle, what I do with all my work, because the mind management is the tool, the neurocycle is the tool of self-regulated mind management. You are training yourselves to get knowledge, get understanding, get wisdom, get more knowledge, get more, which I call the wisdom cycle, okay? And in doing that, what you're essentially doing is you're getting knowledge, which is then changing your attitude, which is then changing your behaviors. All of that's kind of philosophical stuff working together. And when that's happening, you're balancing your brain waves. And I will give you a fabulous technique at the end, which is basically what I read out in the post today. There's many ways you can do this, but I'm going to give you one really fabulous technique. We're going to unpack how to vent our joys. So let's move on a little bit. So our brainwaves are active all the time because the brain is always active, because the mind is always active 24/7. So your brain is always active because your mind is always active, even when you are sleeping. Okay, so the different waves of the brain change in terms of how they move through the brain. So the different waves of the brain, and I'll explain them now. You get delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta, gamma, and high gamma. And I'm going to explain that in terms of a whole analogy in a moment. But the point here is that the different waves of the brain change in terms of how they are moving through the brain. And that basically is in response to how we are thinking, feeling, and choosing. So what we are thinking, feeling, and choosing is influencing this. And this is exciting because you can go from a tsunami in your brain or from a complete flat line in your brain to a balance in your brain just through using your mind, through using different systems, to using the neurocycle. And there's millions of different techniques, but they all fall within the neurocycle. And the specific technique I'm going to teach you today would be considered an active reach, which is step 5 of the neurocycle, and it is one of venting your joys, okay? Instead of just venting negative things, but also add to your venting of the negative, which I want you to do, venting your joys as well. Because venting your joys helps to balance brainwaves. Okay, so let's understand more about them. So when slower brainwaves, okay, so when the waves of the brain, when we have an imbalance and when we have the waves being slower, then what happens is that our brain feels sluggish, which means our body feels sluggish, or our systems of our body feel sluggish, and that creates a negative feedback loop, and you just feel sluggish in general. So slower brainwaves are dominant. We feel tired, slow, sluggish, dreamy, sort of negatively like dreamy, and not really being able to process information or emotions very well. But when the higher frequencies are dominant, okay, so the lower frequencies are things like delta, theta, alpha. The higher frequencies are beta, high beta, gamma, and high gamma. Okay, when they are dominant, we can feel wired and hyper alert and just too much going on in our brain. So those are the two extremes. So when we're in the sort of minus 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's when the slow brain waves, which are delta, theta, and alpha, they are dominating too much. They're not flowing in a balanced way. They're dominating too much. And when that happens, you feel this, as I said, that you feel sluggish, tired, slow, unable to process information. Then whoops, to the other extreme, when the higher frequencies dominate, like there's too much beta, too much high beta, too much high gamma, that's when we can feel hyper alert, manic, very wired. That's the word I was looking for. Very, very wired. And that it's exhausting, okay? And that can feel like there's just too much going on in our brains. So we don't want those two states. But if you're in them, don't panic, because now that you're learning, remember you're getting knowledge, so you can get understanding, so you can get wisdom, then you can bring balance back again. Okay, so basically how our brainwaves function and our daily experiences of the world are inseparable, because we experience the world through our mind, and then our brain is how we experience our mind. So the experiences goes through our mind to our brain, and then we experience our mind through our brain and our body, how our brain and our body are responding. Okay, so they're inseparable because the mind is moving through the brain. So basically the brain responds to the mind. When our emotions are out of balance and very negative, and when we aren't rising to the challenge and building new knowledge into our brains, and when we are responding in a chaotic and reactive way to the chronic and acute stresses of life, this will be reflected in our physiology, our blood, and our hormones, and also we will be basically out of balance, okay? So our ability to self-regulate, to self-assess will be affected because the mind is moving through the brain and our body. So remember, we experience the mind in our brain and our body. So there's a corresponding relationship between mind and brain that plays out in our mental, emotional, and neurological and physical health. Okay, so when we change our perception, okay, then we change our brain's response, and even our physiological, even on a physiological and cellular level. And that plays back into our minds, okay? So when we use stress to our advantage, for example, and venting our joys is one of those ways we can do that, we essentially use our more aware and ready state of mind to spring into action. We see balance and coherence and connectivity in the brain. Okay, so in other words, when we vent our joys, which is the technique I really want to teach you today, and there's many other ways, as I keep saying, what we are essentially doing is we see that will bring balance back into the two sides of the brain, balance between the brain waves, which then immediately balances the blood flow and oxygen. So, for example, you'll get a whoosh of blood and oxygen to the front of the brain, the frontal cortex, which is really important for controlling impulsivity and decision making. So you become a responder versus a reactor. Okay, and basically, when we see balance, coherence, and connectivity in the brain, and across the top of the brain, you've got 200 different specializations in your brain, and you want them all connected to produce the uniqueness of you. So when we are balancing our brain, that works really well, and your creativity, the uniqueness of how you think, will come out. And as I keep saying, one of the ways to do that is to use joy in your active reach, step 5 of the neurocycle, to actually be able to manage this process, to get this happening. So you can make this happen. Okay, so we see balance, coherence, and connectivity in the brain. However, prolonged and unmanaged toxic stress results in anxious, racing, and chaotic thoughts in the brain, which can be damaging to the physiological system. Okay, so I want to jump down here to say connectivity and balance. All this is to say that our brain, mind, and body crave connectivity and balance. It's craving it all the time. You want connection between the two sides of the brain, so the 200 specializations can work, so the different waves can work. That's what your brain is craving, okay? So what's essentially happening is that in any one day, in any one moment, we are either reconceptualizing what's happening to us, not just replacing, not just taking that's a bad thought, I must replace it with a toxic thought. I don't want you to do that. It's not going to work. That's a Band-Aid. That's cutting the head off the weed, and the roots are still there. It's going to grow back. I want you to pull the weeds out. And that's reconceptualizing through the neurocycles, through the 5 steps. Okay, you want to, in any one day, you want to reconceptualize, okay? And so if you're not reconceptualizing and creating new stuff, you're actually reinforcing old stuff. So by doing things like venting your joy as an active reach, you are training your body to become you're training your body, your brain, and your mind. You're using your mind to do all of this, to create neural patterns where you have more resilience, and you are able to move into a stronger response mode versus a react mode. So that means you reconceptualize. So when you feel yourself going down a negative hole in the past, if you don't do this stuff that I'm telling you, you'll stay doing that, and then it just accumulates and makes you feel worse. But knowing what I'm teaching you, you can say, okay, I got a neurocycle, I'm aware of this, go through this, get to the active reach. Venting my joy is going to balance my brain waves, and then you can immediately go back into that, use that technique to help you. When people are really in a bad place and they don't, sometimes breathing and meditation are hard to do, venting your joys is actually quite a good thing to do. You can vent some frustrations, but force yourself to vent some joys and really express that and say, like, think of something that's wonderful. As you do that, as you say it, you're drawing on very healthy networks in the brain, which then helps immediately to force a flow of quantum energy through the brain that rebalances your brainwaves. So now I'm going to explain how the different brainwaves work. So we've got 5 different types. We've got delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta, and gamma. They all work together. So I want you to imagine that you're on a surfboard on the sea, but you are right out, far out to the sea in the really, really deep part. And you are kind of moving over this massive, beautiful swell. Maybe you want to be in a boat because you might not want to be so far out on a surfboard, but it's a safe place, okay? There's no sharks in this particular sea that I'm describing, okay? So you're on this amazing surfboard out in the sea on this massive, beautiful wave. Now, that would be a delta wave. It's the slowest wave. It has the lowest amplitude, which is the height of the wave. And it is basically the frequency is 0 to 4 hertz, okay? So it's far beyond the breakers where the sea is swelling. And this is the delta wave. Delta waves are the slow, massively deep powerful high voltage waves that are dominant in dreamless sleep. And dreamless sleep is called non-REM sleep. Okay, so that's dreamless sleep, where we are not dreaming, where we do a lot of restoring and consolidating and sorting out. There's a lot of work going on trying to sort out what we've done during the course of the day to prepare us for the next day. So it's a very important regenerative stage of sleep. It's also the state, part of your sleep cycle, where you are secreting telomerase, which is an enzyme that helps to build telomeres, which are the ends of chromosomes, which are very important for cellular health, for health in your different cells, therefore organs and systems of your body. So when we don't get enough non-REM sleep and enough of that beautiful delta wave, then we don't get enough telomerase, and that affects cellular health and basic bodily health. So it's also an intensely, when you get very spiritual, like when you're awake and you get into this very spiritual zone, like maybe through prayer or through meditation or through looking at a sunset or being in a beautiful, just being with someone that you love, just sitting maybe and holding hands and watching the sea. When you get into that very deep state, playing a musical instrument, being extremely creative, that's when you'll see this high delta flowing, okay? So basically what we see is that when people that are, the high delta is mainly at nighttime, but during the day when you're awake, we can see controlled levels of high delta when people are in the zone. But we also see levels of high delta when people have a lot of suppressed thoughts that are not being dealt with. So if you don't have a long enough sleep cycle and get into that non-REM delta, it doesn't completely regenerate, and then it kind of carries over into your conscious waking moment, and then that kind of is a sort of too much of delta. And it's not the meditative delta, it's another type of delta that then tells us that you are suppressing thoughts. And we saw this with our subjects in our clinical trial, but you can balance that, okay? So when we have unmanaged chaotic minds, those swells can become unmanageably huge and then penetrate from the night into the day. But when I talk about people having a in the zone moment when they're conscious, it's not an unmanaged delta wave. So you get a managed delta wave when you're awake, which is a good one. An unmanaged one tells us that there's something going on and that we need to pay attention, and it makes you feel unsettled. And it's very evident if you're not sleeping, this generally tends to happen. If you've got stuff you're not dealing with and you're having a lot of sleep issues, there's a good chance you have a lot of high delta unmanaged during the day. So delta waves are slow, massively deep, powerful, high voltage waves that are dominant in dreamless sleep, non-REM sleep. Then let's go back to the surfboard. As you turn towards the shore and you start moving towards, the waves peak a little bit more and a little bit more inwards, and they move a little faster. And this is the theta wave, theta. So theta wave has a frequency of 4 to 8 hertz, and it's often referred to as the healing creative wave. So theta is the healing creative wave, which is super interesting because when theta flows, that's when you get this healing response in your body. So when people often are prayed for, when people are thinking of you, sitting with you when you're sick, sitting with you to comfort you, that increases the theta wave, which creates a whole hormonal change in your endocrine system, which can help towards and also calms down your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamic pituitary axis, which controls your basically how you manage stress. That theta wave, when that's flowing, that can get under control. Okay, so theta is also associated with, basically, theta is very active in REM sleep. That's rapid eye movement sleep, where we dream. So when we're dreaming, we're sorting out our thoughts as well that we've built during the day. And so it goes from a very regenerative state in the non-REM into REM. We dream and we're sorting. Okay, and that's where we have lots of dreams. We're trying to put this all together and fix things and so it's basically, theta is associated with creativity, insight, healing, light sleep, and is a dominant frequency in healing and highly creative states. It's also very active when we remember emotional experiences. So let's say you're in a therapy session or you're discussing something with someone, you can have a highly emotional experience. And then we'll see levels of theta peaking. I just want to state here that all these waves are always flowing. And they've just flow at different amounts during different times of the day. So it's not like you have delta switched on at this point and everything else is switched off. Everything is always, your brain is, all the waves are always flowing, but they just change in terms of their frequency and influence and dominance in different states. And the whole point is to have a balance. That's why I use the wave analogy to explain it to you. So now as we move closer to the shore, the waves start becoming almost like moving bridges where there's movement carrying you forward. It starts moving, whereas before it's kind of just the swells. Now it's moving you forward towards, and that's what we would call alpha, like a bridge. Alpha is like a bridge between the very conscious mind of the beta, high beta, gamma, and the more non-conscious mind. We see when the non-conscious mind is dominating, we're going to have theta, delta dominating. Okay, so the non-conscious mind is always working. So that's why at night times theta and delta play a larger role. During the day, it plays a lesser role because the non-conscious mind draws on all four all the time. But when we're just in the non-conscious, we'll have mainly delta, theta. When we're in conscious states, when we wake up, then we're going to have a balance, a sort of like a balance, a little bit less of the delta, theta, a little bit more of the gamma and high beta, and alpha is like a bridge in between. So alpha is great because alpha is this bridge that helps us to get insightful. When we get intuitive, when we get insightful, we activate the alpha bridge, and alpha plays a role in bringing the different waves together in a nice balanced way. So it's like a balancing thing. If you think of a seesaw, it kind of is a balancing kind of wave. It's a bridge, it's a connector. That's why I use the concept of bridge. And it's at around about 8 to 12 hertz. It reflects a peaceful calmness and a readiness to action. So it's the one that when we want to assess a situation, that's why we've got to have a balance, because we've got to have each of these different aspects. Alpha creates the aspect of us being calm and balancing our options, getting ready for action. So it's also associated with alertness, reflecting. So when you go into the reflect state, for example, of the neurocycle, you're going to have a lot of alpha happening. It's happening throughout, but you're going to get a peak of alpha as you move from gather awareness into reflect. It's a state of peacefulness, readiness, meditation, self-regulation. Alpha connects the higher frequencies. That's the high beta, gamma, and the two lower frequencies. Okay, so it connects them. Okay, so as you move even closer to the shore, now the waves get faster, and busier, and you get that white crest. Now the brain is really online. So when you're sleeping, you're not going to have beta and high beta. So the build-up of the wave is going to be beta, where you're online, and the crest, the white, and where it crashes is going to be high beta. So you think it's almost like you're thinking, feeling, and then as you get to the crest, you're choosing, and then choops, it crashes on the beach with high beta, and then we have gamma, which are the little waves, and then that all sucks back into the sea, and the whole cycle repeats itself. And we want that whole cycle repeating and balancing the two sides of the brain. Okay, so basically, just very quickly, low beta is associated with deep processing, focus, and attention. So as you start processing deeply and making sense of stuff and focusing and attending, we're going to get a lot of that build-up wave. Okay, and finally, the waves crash on the beach, and that's the high, short, impactful burst. Think of it crashing. It's a boom. The build-up is kind of slow, and then the crash on the beach is quick. So we want high bursts. We don't want lots of continual crashing. We want just a nice build, and then a crash. That's the collapsing of the wave. That's as you make a choice, you collapse the wave. Okay, so it's an intense focus wave. It's 15 to 40 hertz, and it's found when you pay deep attention and we make that choice. It's the actual choice you make. So high beta are the brainwaves associated with intense thinking and actually making of a choice. Okay, so when that wave crashes continually like a waterfall or a tsunami, you don't want that. You want it crashing a short burst, and then you want the gamma, and then you want the whole thing to repeat in a nice balanced way. So in order to get that, to balance our brain waves, there's, as I keep saying, so many different techniques. And the neurocycle, the 5 steps of the neurocycle, which is the gather awareness, the reflect, the right into the metacog, the recheck, and the active reach, are doing that all the time. And then you build all these techniques into those. So venting joy is the technique that it would be your active reach if you find that your mind is like a chaos and you are just overwhelmed and you want a quick technique to bring you back down and balance your brain waves. Venting your joy is a way to do that. So how do you vent your joy? You basically are going to find something in your life today that is wonderfully beautiful, even if it's just the fact that you're alive, even if it's just the fact that you maybe had a great meal and it tasted so well, so nice. I mean, or you just did a great workout, or you just had a lovely conversation, or some good news that you heard. Find something and vent it. Something great that you did. Maybe you saw a beautiful photograph of yourself, or maybe you helped someone in a way that then they gave you a great compliment, or you're not boasting. maybe you've studied really hard and you've just finished a degree, or you've just done well in an exam, or you did a great thing at work, or you helped. So what did you do that was great? You're a great person. You're brilliant. There's nothing wrong with celebrating your venting about the beautiful things that you do. Hey, I did this. And you can maybe vent to someone. You can vent yourself. It's like giving yourself a pat on the back. So I want to just read from you some of the beautiful comments that people said. So what joys and wins can you vent about today? Because as you are venting, you are going to get this beautiful balance. You are going to be on your surfboard, going from, let's say now that you're having a bad day. So you've got this waterfall going this side and it's crazy and it's making you feel like anxious, and then you've got, or maybe you're feeling like that's flat line. There's just like no waves in your brain. It feels like there's just everything's just flat line and you just can't be creative and you're foggy and whatever, whichever extreme. So what can you do to bring balance back? How do you get onto that surfboard and get that beautiful delta wave to the theta wave, to the build-up of the beta, to the high beta, to the crashing on the beach, to the gamma, that bridging of the alpha as well, where you can get this clear, insightful, creative, focused thinking, feeling, and choosing thing going. Okay? So you can vent your joy. You can find something. Let me read it to you. It's better when I read it to you. What joy and win can you vent about today? Can you think of something right now at this moment that's a joy? That's a win. Just take a second now to think about that. Okay, and I want you to be proud of yourself. Are you proud of yourself as you think of this? Maybe you think of more than one thing. Fantastic. Maybe you want to write that down while you're listening to me. Maybe you want to pause this podcast and write that down so you can think about this afterwards, and then think about how you are on that surfboard flowing through this whole thing and getting back on your surfboard, and whatever visual you want. That's beautiful. And that's a great visual. When we visualize, we actually accelerate the process of balancing our waves. And that's why I give you these kind of analogies. So I'm giving you hardcore brain science, but I'm giving you an analogy to activate it. So I'm giving you, and that's all mind stuff. So I'm giving you a mind technique to actually drive your mind, to drive your neuroplasticity, and to actually balance the energy in your brain. I mean, I'm feeling so great just sharing this with you. I love this stuff. I'll vent my joy. I love this brain science. I love the fact that I've studied it for years. I love the fact that I can talk about this. I love the fact that I can share it with such joy. I am balancing my brainwaves beautifully now, which is why I look happy, and I'm genuinely happy because this is balancing my brainwaves. So then we asked some people to just comment, and I want to share with you, because I asked them, I want to know what you are proud of yourself for doing and accomplishing, even if it seems so small. So so I'm just going to read a couple. Frosted Confection says, this is a big one for me. I was so happy when you loved the celebration cake I made for you to celebrate the release of your book. She made us the most amazing cake, and you can go back and look at my lives, my Instagram TV, and you'll be able to see the beautiful cake she made and what joy it gave me. And so that gave her joy. So she's celebrating that. Someone else said, I got a promotion last week, so they're celebrating. Someone else said, prioritizing my self-care and giving themselves permission. Talking about that, I'm going for a massage later today, and I was going to cancel that because I had so much work. And I thought, no, I'm not going to. I'm celebrating that took my self-care into consideration, and I'm going to go for a massage between working and come back and go on working. Someone said here, my children were given a scholarship in school. Vent your joy. I'm in a pre-sale part of my book. Vent your joy. I'm seeing the light at the end of a self-publishing journey. Vent your joy. Vent your joy. Yesterday, I took my last final of my summer semester and finished with 98 in both classes. For context, I'm in my first year of college at 25, 8 years after graduating high school. Amazing. Vent your joy. We celebrate with you. I'm almost done with my summer classes. Vent your joy. Someone else said here, I'm 56 and have finally learned to slow down. Vent your joy. I had a difficult, necessary conversation that ended in love. Beautiful. Vent your joy. They took the mess and they repaired it, and they grew. And instead of that going negative, it went positive. Vent your joy. Celebrate that. Guys, don't take these beautiful moments for granted. Celebrate your joy. You are balancing your brainwaves. Let me just read 2 or 3 more and then we'll end this podcast. This person said, I'm really proud of myself on being consistently meditating and working to being my best version. Wonderful. Not here, I'm the most amazing aunt to my nephew. I love that. And the nephew responds, yes. Someone said here, I'm venting the joy about flying on a small plane, and I actually did okay. I survived. I had a lot of anxiety. Flying is not my favorite thing. I faced my fear and I made it to the other side. Well done. We celebrate that with you. Venting joy, speaking life even when negativity surrounds me, enjoying a nice rainy day. My husband got a job and is opening doors. staying hopeful through the season of news which broke my heart and has only been seeing it as only a temporary setback. I mean, I can read there's hundreds of comments here. So here's my challenge to you. When you're feeling like you've got that waterfall, that tsunami, think of the surfboard. Think of getting on the surfboard and going from the beautiful, huge delta wave to the theta, to the alpha, to the building of the beta, to the high beta, to the crest on the beach, to the gamma, and flowing back again. And as you do that, vent your joy. As you visualize yourself doing that, vent your joy. As you're riding the surfboard, just vent your joy. Just do that as an exercise. It's amazing. It will change how you're functioning in that moment. There's so many other techniques, but this is such a powerful one, so easy, so quick. And once your brainwaves are balanced, your attitude shifts and you'll be able to face whatever it is that you're facing in a much more resilient way. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy venting your joy.